Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you here. My name is Mikey Mehenda. I'm going to be hosting today's conversation. This conversation is special. It's part of a collaboration we are doing with Tasmeem, the design conference. The theme is Radical Futures. You're going to hear a little more about this, and we are honored to have two fantastic guests for us to explore this topic of the Arab image. I'm going to pass the mic over to Danielle to talk a little bit about Tasmeem as a conference and the history of it, what Radical Futures is, and also some of the cool stuff that they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mikey. And hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Danielle Emmons, and I am one of the 4 directors of Tasmeem Doha 2022 Radical Futures. And on behalf of my co-directors, Basma Hamdi, Dr. Diane Durr, and Mesa Al-Momin, I would like to express how honored and excited we are for this collaboration with Afikra. And we have designed a series of conversations leading up to Tasmeem 2020, which is this coming March, touching on topics that range from the future of education, the future of food, the future of language, and the future of Arab image. A conversation that we're really looking forward to beginning today with our 2 leading figures in art and design, Mohamed Somji and Farah Fayed. And just a little bit about Tasmeem. Tasmeem Doha is an international biennial art and design conference hosted and organized by BC Arts Qatar since 2004. And each edition of Tasmeem Doha highlights a unique and contemporary theme within art and design. And the 2022 conference, Radical Futures, addresses the role of design in shaping the future. The event is an inclusive and multifaceted view of the future, one that not only speculates on technological advances, but on future threats and changes, whether environmental, geographic, cultural, or social. And the event is open to the public with attendees and participants consisting of international designers, artists, academics, students, industry professionals, and the local community like yourselves. And we really believe that now more than ever, we must ask pertinent questions, raise critical dialogues, and respond with clarity. And with that said, if you have a project that you think will fit well within the theme of Radical Futures, we just launched a call for projects which you are invited to submit to. Simply visit our Instagram page, that's Tasmeem_Doha, and you'll find the link for submissions in the bio. Thank you so much.
Great, that's great. So Danielle, spell it out.
The URL for
the Instagram
okay.
handle.
TASMEEM, so that's a double E, TASMEEM, and then _DOHA.
Perfect. Okay. Danielle, thanks so much. And thanks to all the co-directors who are also on the call. And we're going to get started with the show. Welcome to our 2 special guests, Mohamed Somji and Farah Fayed. Mohamed is the director of Gulf Photo Plus, a Dubai-based gallery and community organization cultivating visual practices in photography in the UAE and across the wider Manassa region since 2004. We're going to learn much more about that soon. And Farah is the director of programs at Beirut, DC. Beirut DC is a cultural association for the development of independent Arab cinema. Beirut DC has been around since 1999 and aims at promoting, enhancing, and supporting a creative cinematic movement in the Arab world through production, promotion, and training. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Did we lose Farah? No, there you are.
No, but it's just Beirut. I mean, I'm here.
Okay, great. I know the pain. Welcome to both of you. This is an honor to have you both here. As I mentioned, the title of the talk is The Future of the Arab Image. And one of the things I love about these talks that we're doing in collaboration with Tasmeem is that the titles can mean everything and mean nothing at all. So I want to talk about what you both think of when you get invited to something like this, where the title is The Future of the Arab Image. Somji, maybe I'll start with you. What does that really mean to you, and what could it mean, and what do you think people think of when they hear something like this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I can always push back with this idea of the future, and also this like homogenous idea of like Arab, right? Like, I mean, I'm here based in the Gulf. I think visual interpretations and visual practices are very different in the Gulf versus in North Africa or the Levant or Iran, for that matter. And and also I think that for the longest time, I always would see the West obsessed with this idea of futurism, right? And it was almost like we're advancing our civilization or our technology, whereas everybody is regressing. And this was the idea of like futurism. And I felt that there were these undertones in a lot of the conversations around futurism. So yeah, but I'd like to talk about what I see happening, and where I see artists and photographers kind of moving the needle on how they're discussing social issues, and talk about the good things that are happening that I hope will happen more so in the future, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Great. Farah, what about you?
For me, if I were to talk about moving image, I think somehow technically everyone is at their best at the moment. And because technology is now easy access to everyone. So I'm not going to talk about that, especially that the technology in the moving image can say you have to account for TikTok as much as you have to account for a film. You have to account for everything if you want to say, oh, the moving image. But what I kind of hear it is a bit more towards the image of Arabs through how they talk about themselves, how they show themselves, and to support as much like the Arab narrative. I know I'm using the word Arab here a bit loosely. Let's just say the region, everyone who speaks the language, everyone who considers that they're coming from here, or want to talk about here, or feel like they belong here, everyone. And I read image, I think a bit about how we present ourselves in an image, how we've been filming ourselves, how we've been telling our stories, basically maybe the new narrative that we're trying to disseminate about ourselves.
Yeah, I want to talk about something, because for me, I love exploring what these sort of arbitrary monikers can mean, right? Things like Middle East, Arab, Manasa, Gulf, all these like very location-based identifiers. They're arbitrary. You can choose one or the other. There are Venn diagrams that overlap. It's interesting, both GPP and Beirut DC have location-based identifiers in the name that may or may not geographically ground your work. So Somji, maybe I can have you speak about the way you sort of think about your work regionally, and how you're trying to, or maybe not trying to, explore what the sort of the images that come out of the Gulf are now.
Sure. So
and maybe you don't think of it. You can push back and say, I don't think about this at all. This is a stupid question.
Yeah. No, I think that it was relevant when we first started, because it was very much rooted and grounded in the Emirates. But I think we've definitely, our footprint is extended beyond. It's a name I inherited from the person that, had the kind of trade license, if you like. And we've kept it. And I think we do a lot of work within the Gulf, but I think in the last 5-10 years, we've moved beyond to include North Africa, the Levant region, and even beyond in the sense that we're actively seeking to showcase work that's being made here in our region abroad, whether it's Europe or the US or what have you, or even Africa and South Asia. So but it is interesting for us to kind of see the differences, the connections, the kind of crossbreeding that happens in terms of the visual stories that come out of artists and photographers, the Gulf is inspired by what they're seeing, work that's coming out of Egypt or from Lebanon or Jordan or what have you, it's in that sense it's quite this cross-pollination is quite interesting. But yeah, I think we aren't really thinking just Gulf. Of course, we're physically based in the Gulf, and when we have our programming, or but now, especially with Zoom and online, I think we've extended our footprint to an area much wider, much beyond that.
Have you noticed, Somji, just to stay with you for a second, have you noticed the sort of vocabulary of the vocabulary of the images that you're seeing change over the last sort of 10, 15 years? How long have you been based in Dubai, you personally?
All my life, pretty much. And I'm not an Arab. I feel like I'm an honorary Arab. I'm from Tanzania, but lived in Dubai most of my life. So yeah, the vocabulary has definitely changed, and I guess we'll get into it. But if you think about it, I'm always going to come back to this fact that Saudi Arabia lifted their ban on photography as recently as 2006. Up until that point, photography was banned or illegal. You could not take photos in a public space. And even in the rest of the Gulf, while photography wasn't banned, it was also something that a lot of people kind of were scared of because of censorship, or worried that they get in trouble. And so there's been a very, very fast evolution, and it has a lot of kind of like a ornamental or a decorative purpose in the Gulf for a long time, and that has changed very, very rapidly in the last decade. And but no, for sure. And I guess I have some points that we can get into, but it has changed drastically. It is changing, and it's really exciting to see a much more complicated, much more complicated narratives, and it's going away from kind of your hardcore, documentary, photo essay style work to things that are, very personal, very subtle, very metaphorical. So that's really interesting to see, and I guess we'll get into that some more.
Yeah. Farah, a similar question about Beirut DC. The organization has been around for 20 plus years, very much at the center of the film industry and cinema industry, both in Lebanon, but also regionally. How do you feel like you're able to do that work whilst being so centered in a specific context in Beirut that has a very, every sort of experience is unique, but to live in Beirut is very different than to live in Amman. It's very different than living in Damascus. It's very different than living in Cairo. It's very different than living in Lati. These are different places that have different perspectives. How do you feel like you guys are able to support this broader ecosystem while being so rooted in Beirut?
It's true that Beirut caters to all 22 Arab countries. Everything we've ever done has the thing is that independent cinema as an industry itself in the region it differs from in heaviness from a country to another, or in abundance from a country to another. But in general, it's somewhat all linked within the same network of. In general, isn't really a very tough task. And the players are always meeting. They're always making sure that they know each other. They know what we've all been up to. But one thing's for sure that really helps us a lot is that we always have partners with local. We almost never do anything on our own. We're always partnering with a local organization, be it in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Jordan, you name it. Everywhere we've had a project, everywhere we've opened a call, everywhere we've hosted a lab, it's always been with a local partner. And this is for a multitude of reasons. A, to get yourself get your call or your event or your lab actually known by the players in that country, and to make sure that you're keeping up with the sensitivities, with the differences, just exactly what you said. You can claim to know what the industry needs, but you cannot really know on your own until you talk to them. So it has a lot of things united, but it also differs a lot in problems from money, like the support that the industry has, be it financial, the structure of production, and so on and so forth.
So this is great, Farah. I want to stick on this for a second. When we think about the title, The Future of the Arab Image, it speaks to this idea of creativity, right? These are creative choices that that artists can make, right? Whether they're the moving image or stills, whether they're on TikTok, regardless. It suggests that these are exclusively creative decisions, artistic decisions. But that's not true. Obviously, the reality of life, financial considerations, technological considerations help change and guide art as much as anything. So I loved when I saw this new project that you guys have coming out, Daleel.Film, which I have up on the screen, that is very, very clearly addressing this issue, which is essentially, we at Beirut DC care about art, care about cinema. We think it helps society, and we know that it's very, very costly to make film. And so talk a little bit about this project and how you think this is going to sort of impact the sort of regional industry.
Mickey, for us, what Beirut DC has been trying to do ever since its inception is cater to the industry's needs, to the independent industry's needs. When an independent film festival was missing, Ayam Beirut Cinemaiya was created. When workshops and labs to train professional documentaries, for example, DocMed was created. When a co-production platform was needed, Beirut Cinema Platform was created. We've always tried to cater for what's missing and what's needed. The Impact program came along, catering to the fact and the needs of filmmakers, Arab independent filmmakers, to contribute with their films to have social and environmental impact. But then we realized that to do that and to enable filmmakers to be able to do that, you need to give them as many resources as possible. Hence came Daleel.Film. Daleel.Film has 3 guides at the moment. The yellow guide, which is a guide that is available for all Arab producers and filmmakers. It has all of the funds that the Arab nationalities are eligible to apply to. And you can filter that by your needs, be it you have a short, you have an animation, you have a feature, you have whatever you need. You can filter that and find the right funding platform to apply. This is actually information that's out there, but a lot of fresh and new producers and filmmakers do not know how to find them. So we've tried to put it all in one place. It's quite easy. All you need to do is filter what your project is, what you're looking for. You're looking for funding in your post-production, in your production, and what is it, and so on. The blue guide is a directory of NGOs or civil society actors who they're filtered by their theme of interest, by what they do. And for now, you can only find ones who work in Lebanon, but we're expanding every few months. We're adding a country from the Arab region. If your film has a social or environmental cause and you wish to create impact with the film and you need allies from the civil society, you can filter and find them here. The green guide is a guide to green production. If you want to shoot your film with the least carbon footprint possible, you can follow this guide. And there are also green alternatives. Because we thought when we were making this, you're like, okay, fine, we're going to suggest things that you can never find. No, we're going to tell them where they're going to find the alternative. For now, we only have Lebanese green vendors, but we're adding countries one after the other. We did not do this on our own because this comes from the same of partnering. If we want filmmakers to partner with people from outside the cinema sector to make impact with their films, we also start by ourselves by partnering with the right. We're not environmental experts. We needed environmental experts to help us. So we have a lot of beautiful partners that have helped us make this. You can download the impact field guide from here as well, but this is one that we only translated. It's done by Doc Society. And we plan to add more and more resources, anything that we think the independent cinema sector needs. I'm not going to talk some more about our partners. There are many. They are beautiful. I invite you just to go on Daleel.Film so that you can see all the...
Okay, amazing. So I want to switch to Somji a little bit. I'm curious because I wonder, and Somji, you can be as honest as possible. How often do folks from the photography world speak to folks from the film world in the region? Is it sort of like photography and music, photography and dance, or because they both have to do with image slightly, obviously, that you're more kindred spirits? I mean, is there a lot of interaction?
There is of late, and I think with every photographer now pretty much has a video camera on their cameras, and I think that distance has definitely shortened, and photographers are making films, and I'm seeing more and more of that. In fact, one of the points that I wanted to talk about was the future of the Arab image is definitely more than we have to redefine what an image is, and I'm finding that artists and photographers are not satisfied or not content with just the two-dimensional image. They are using mapping, sound, text, poetry, testimonies, and that I think is really interesting, because it especially with new technologies available both to produce them but also to consume them, we're getting a much more well-rounded, more interesting multidimensional stories. And I think that photographers are looking at filmmakers for inspiration, whether it's how they're approaching their subjects. And I think a lot of photographers and artists that we're seeing in this region are starting to use fictional elements, mythology, surrealism, even dark humor. And I think a lot of them are inspired by what they're seeing in the film world. And I have to say that I think the filmmakers are probably a little bit more advanced than still photographers in kind of tackling some of these issues. And I think that we're not far behind as photographers. And again, even that terminology is changing. I think I see a couple of people on this on the participants. Mohamed Mahdi, for example, if it's the same Mohamed Mahdi from Egypt, he's already using sound and video in his projects and putting them up in interactive websites. So there's definitely this cross-pollination that's happening, and that's exciting, and it's it's being able to tell that story in whatever tools helping to do that.
Do you, if I were to sort of ask you kind of like a cheeky, Somji, if I were to ask you a sort of a cheeky question about trends, right? Yeah. Imagine this was like a CNBC type show, right? What trends are you seeing in the world of photography in the Arab world, in the Middle East? What are some of the sort of the technological trends, the thematic trends, the sort of trends in terms of demand and audience and funding that may be dictating what art is going to be made over the next 10 years?
Sure. So I think a lot of photographers in our region, I mean, they've had good training in that they've always struggled to find funding, especially from Western sources. And, there were very limited funding, at least in the Gulf. I know it's a bit different in other parts of the Arab world, but so they're very good at kind of bootstrapping their own projects. And, that's going to happen more and more. If there's a story that they're passionate about, they will find a way to, get funding or kind of do it on the cheap, or do it as, with as minimal effort and expense that they can. And then if it catches traction, they can go out to people for funding. And, and I think that that's something that's great, that there are more opportunities out there for people to seek funding. So that's one. I think that in terms of on the tech side, again, cameras are far more accessible, affordable, and it's easier to get something up and running, unlike before. And there's less gatekeepers. You don't have to know a photo editor. You don't have to go to Perpignan or to show your work to editors. You have interesting work, and you put it out there, and it can kind of have a life of its own. So that's great. We're also seeing a lot more personal narratives kind of being interwoven into people's work. There's definitely the rise of artists kind of looking at personal histories, looking at their kind of own personal circumstances, family issues, to kind of tell wider stories. So that's really interesting. And they're using much more complicated narratives, and as we heard about, what Tasmeem is about, asking these pertinent questions and kind of, finding allegorical ways to tell these stories. And so I think these are kind of, I'm seeing the trends, and also using, more, fiction, and being less, less, documentary, and especially in the Gulf, we're seeing this, this idea of like pushing back on this idea of like a beautiful image, being a lot more looser with that to kind of really be hard hitting with the work that they're doing. So that's kind of what we're seeing.
Okay, Farah, I'm going to ask you kind of the same question. As I feel like you and the rest of the team at Beirut DC are pretty close to the ground. So if you put your ear to the ground, what are some of the trends that you think are happening across the sort of independent cinema space regionally, that me as a viewer or me just as somebody, a movie goer or a fan, may not be able to anticipate if you're thinking about it on a sort of a 10-year basis?
I mean, I think it's a bit tougher to narrow it down, since, as we were saying, it's a wide range of types of productions and different backgrounds coming from different countries. But one thing's for sure, there's a rise in I'm not going to say personal stories, but more of personal opinions. But you see, the distribution models and the production models that have governed the independent filmmaking industry for the past forever have been quite channeled, quite tough, quite hard to infiltrate. The regional funds are very few, so you're always having to apply for international funds. This means international festivals, specific directions, trends that are kind of I'm not going to say imposed because the funds want to impose them, because this is not because these are not planned by agendas. This is just what is trendy in Europe or in the global north. So and it has been kind of dictates the types of productions that might arise. But what we've been seeing since the beginning of the pandemic is that all of the system is in question at the moment, including the distribution model. Because distribution of the independent cinema has always been close to zero in the region. No one dares to distribute independent films. Hence, no one has the money to put in these films because they will never make money, supposedly. They will never make money. What happened in 2020 is disrupt all that cycle, from the funding side till the distribution side. Because now you have online platforms. We have Aflamuna. Beirut DC has aflamuna.online, which features independent Arab cinema for free. And the amount of viewership is amazing. So the whole thing about people don't want to see these films, these films cannot make money, is shaken to the core at the moment. So what I think I'm seeing, or at least I'm like feeling from when we talk to filmmakers, is that they want to make their own stories. They don't want to wait for a fund to open. They don't want to wait for a call to open to see if their story fits the call. They just want to make up their own stories and tell them the way they want to tell them. And if a fund agrees, très bien. And if they don't, we don't need them. We'll wait for another, which I think is brilliant. And I'm so glad that this whole cycle is disrupted, because now we get to decide what we want to do next and how we want to distribute the films, who should see these films. The big cinema theaters are not the big distributors are not the one who decide who sees these films anymore. And the right to access to communities to see these films is as big as the right for these artists to make these films. We don't want we should be done with films getting awards in Berlin and never being seen in Egypt. It's insane.
So, okay, so on that note, I want to talk a little bit about the balance of sort of art and entertainment. This idea across, this now obviously not only applies to cinema and to photography, it applies to music, it applies to visual arts, it applies to theater, but how do you, both of you, think about this? In your work, you are both concerned with people seeing this stuff, right? And a broader society engaging with this work. I know it's mentioned in Beirut DC, sort of about admission. There's a huge part of it that is good art and cinema creates good art, good societies. Basically, that's like the dotted line, essentially. If people come and see good art, it sort of fundamentally changes them, it awakens them, it allows them to be better civic members and neighbors. And so the assumption is you want them to come in the door, you want them to engage us with this stuff. But how do you sort of think about making sure that they're not just up on the screen at the Berlin film festival and that the actual people who live in these places watch them and engage with them. Maybe Farah, jump in.
First, we're trying to create a support network, Beirut DC, and a lot of partners in the region. We're trying to create a support network for these films to get out of theaters and go to the communities that should see these films. We're trying to encourage as much as we can film owners to leave that distribution, what we call alternative distribution, to leave that non-commercial alternative distribution rights free. Like sell the film to Netflix, do whatever you want with that, but keep that with the film owner so that they can take the film, go with it into schools, go with it to, public parks, go with it anywhere they need to go to show these films. And we've been trying to help as much as we can. Films, we have let me give you an example of a film called Asha Captain, Lift Like a Girl. It's actually on Netflix, everyone can see it. It's a film by Mai Zayed. It's a documentary about a female weightlifter called Zabiba. It's actually about her and the trainer who's been helping and training girls in Alexandria for years and years, for decades, and who's been producing Olympic medalists, African champions, all female, with zero support. Unfortunately, this man died while making the film, but the girls are still going strong. So film and the impact camp film is doing is they made a 30-minute cut of the film, and they're screening that in schools all over Egypt, in areas where people would never even think of going to the theater. They made that 30-minute cut that is child appropriate. There are no insults in it, no scenes that might be annoying to children. And they did that in collaboration with an NGO, with Right to Play, and with many NGOs and with academics. And she's going to screen the film. She literally takes the film out of the theater and takes it to get inspired by Zabiba and her friends. And she's been able to highlight these female athletes, draw them as champions, inspirational figures to all the young generation. It's already been doing great impacts in Cairo and the rest of Egypt. And we're helping her take this film outside of the theater and do that all over the region. The same goes for many films. There's this Tunisian film, it's a political film called Al Bar, on the crossbar, that's doing the same with the film. They went out to just to show the film. This is the Aflamuna. We love Aflamuna. We love that free access, and we're giving it and growing it. But Aflamuna this is not really the full-blown access that we wish to create. Yeah. And we're doing a couple of more projects, not based only on the films themselves and on helping them take it out of the theater and going to the communities, but also on helping community spaces bring films to them and screen them in their own communities. But from schools to churchyards to municipality houses, anywhere. Just screen the films, they're yours.
Cool, amazing. So good. So I want to, thanks Farah. I want to ask Mohamed a question, kind of following up on the last thing you said, and maybe in response to Farah's. You said the phrase hard hitting, right? In a region that has sort of been drowning in hard-hitting news, news journalism that brings you sort of jarring images of the battlefield for so many years and orientalized images. How do you feel like we as an industry and as a society can balance this idea of hard-hitting imagery and tropes and sort of reaffirming visual tropes and stereotypes that are not helpful?
I think that's already happening. The artists and photographers are really pushing back. And if you just take, for example, if we go to the Arab documentary photography program and you look even randomly at the last, 10, 15 projects, you can see that I think photographers are employing a lot of tactics to kind of push back against that, and are being a lot more subtle, being a lot more interesting and multi-layered in their approach, and resisting this idea of making sensationalist or titillating images for the sake of feeding into this, spiral of tropey, news images that are very Eurocentric in how this place is portrayed, and I think that's really interesting. And some have to employ really subversive methods to be able to, talk about things that can be quite sensitive, and it's just really heartening to see how they're doing that and being really innovative and clever in kind of taking their work to a point where using subtlety, double entendres, like being really nuanced about it, and I think that's great. And I think visual literacy is definitely improving. And what Farah was saying in terms of distribution models, we're seeing that as well change. I mean, of course, photographers have social media, which for a still image or still image plus captions, etc., is definitely a way to kind of propagate your work, without the gatekeepers, as we spoke about. But also things like, one of the things that we do that's quite popular is like these slide fests where we show 6 photographers' work, give them 5 minutes, and then there's a Q&A with the audience, and it's like a moving exhibition almost. And this can happen anywhere. All you need is a room and a projector. And now with Zoom, it's also possible to kind of bring people from abroad to kind of share their work. Photographers are making zines and photo books, and you don't have to go to a fancy publisher and spend 40,000 euros to make them. You can do them, for much cheaper. And so, I'm really excited to see, this kind of direction, that photographers and artists are taking, and many of them at, a lot of personal perils, and really kind of pushing the boundaries and finding ways to do it. And yeah.
Amazing. Okay, I want to ask one last question to both of you before we get to our quick Q&A. And this is about representation. So if I go back to this title of The Future of the Arab Image, for me, when I think about my understanding of Beirut, the city that I call home, where I live, the sort of the future that I'm hoping to see there is one that it has a very expansive definition, and includes representation from the Filipino people who live in my building and have lived there for longer than I've lived in Beirut, longer than I've been alive. And it includes obviously representation from Syrians and Palestinians and Bangladeshis and Ethiopians and people who are helping shape and make this place. And the Arab world is a region, and will always be a region, that is at a crossroads of many different places and cultures. I'm curious if you think about the sort of the future of the near future and medium-term future. Are you seeing that sort of expansive representation in the artistic output that is coming out of this region? And if so, can you give a few examples of things for people to look at and check out after this call and after they listen to the podcast? Maybe Farah, maybe if you can start, and then we'll speak to Somji.
I've surely heard a lot about projects that cover foreign workers in the region, but they're still at the level of covering the problem of the conditions, the working conditions, or like the obvious problems. Yeah. Which, but it still hasn't gone yet. I mean, at least with the projects I've seen, I can't presume to know all what's out there. But from what I've seen, I haven't seen anything that's taking it to the second level. Okay, so this is a person who's lived here for, as you said, forever, and what's their life like? Because it's unfortunately still at the level of a fight for the right of the foreign worker. So I can't I mean, there's this example of a film that was done quite a while back. It's called Champ of the Camp. It's about the migrant workers in Dubai and the singing competition they have every year. It's a very touching documentary. But still, all of the work that I've seen so far, again, only addresses the problem, not as much as, or the problems, or how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to make this better? Which needs to be done. But I think we're still at that level. We're not yet at But there's a lot of work on Syrian workers in Lebanon and on Syrian refugees in Lebanon, but it's always still at the level of, unfortunately, the tragedy that is going on. Not yet about really integration and how they're living their lives and where did they come from and how do they even have families here or are planning to continue to live here.
Okay. Somji?
Yeah, I think you know, there could be a lot more, but I think I'm encouraged by seeing quite a few interesting projects around the region. I mean, one of the artists, you know, who just released a book, Augustine Paredes, who you probably met when you were in Dubai, Mikey, but he's a Filipino artist, and he, you know, talks a lot about his experience, not just as a migrant, but also his experiences, you know, kind of moving past this, like, oh, I come as a migrant, but also in dealing with society, and we're seeing beyond, you know, the migrant workers. We're seeing, like, if you again, if you look at the Arab Documentary Photography Program, which everybody should check out at their website and see the diversity and breadth of the work. Rehab in Egypt, for example, is looking at the Sinai-based Bedouin people, and you know, there's a lot of work looking at, you know, feminine projects or feminist projects, like so I'm encouraged to see that there is representation. One thing that I feel that is still missing is, you know, not necessarily in terms of nationality, but like in terms of, you know, classes. Like, you know, we're not seeing a lot of work around the working class, regardless of, you know, where they're coming from. And as Farah said, you know, if it is, it's very much kind of focusing on this issue of, like, yeah, their, you know, the lives are hard and things, but moving beyond that is something that I feel, again, also in photography is lacking. But hopefully some of the people that we have here will kind of address that and, you know, look towards making work in that realm.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, because the technological barriers are no longer there, obviously. Maybe before we go to the quick Q&A, this sort of brings me to something that I thought maybe we'd touch on, but you've grazed up upon it, which is how we brought in the sort of the definitions of cinema and sort of photography to start including social media and sort of at this point very advanced editing platforms like TikTok that are creating and sort of reframing new media, right? And to include, because if you think about the stories that the working class are telling, they're telling it on very aptly and very effectively. They're telling those stories through, you know, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram. That's where they're telling their stories, right? They're not going to look for grants online. They're just it's like in the 80s, the hip hop industry in the Bronx, right? They were just doing it on old turntables and their parents' records from the 60s. So maybe both of you can talk a little bit about this and how to sort of envelope that community and put a capital A art on their work so that they're not known as just like TikTokers, but they're also known as artists, which they are.
I don't think we should have an opinion about this because it's a fact. It's there. Yeah. I mean, when the digital first came out, all the pellicule, the real people like, oh no, but it's just there now. Face it, live with it. And when we, in 20 years, when we look back at the art that came out in these years, this is going to be a big part of it, whether we like it or not. We should never claim to be the judges of this and say this is good, this is not good. No, this is how the people are telling their stories today. Be it the young generation in general, be it the migrant workers that Mickey's just talking about. This is the art of this era, and we should sit back, let it grow, watch where it goes, and applaud the effort, because this is their language. It's not mine personally, but it definitely is my cousin's language. And bravo, this is their language. We should appreciate it. We should not have a say in it. They have a say in it. They're imposing it, and good for them.
Yeah. Somji, take us away.
Nothing to add to that. I mean, Farah put it beautifully and articulated that. And, you know, and I've seen some artists try to kind of like cull some of that work. But again, you know, which voices are you going to include and which ones are you going to exclude, and who makes you the judge of that? So yeah, I think it's definitely a phenomena that is, you know, kind of evolving on its own. And that's exactly like you said, Mikey, that's where you're seeing that work, and, you know, and people are sharing it, and it's kind of circulating, and it's allowing for these kind of representations to happen and on its own, and you know, great that it is, and long may it continue.
Amazing. Okay, so we're going to do 4 quick Q&A. These are rapid fire. Because there's 2 of you, I'm going to ask each of you to pick one of the questions, okay? So we can figure out who goes first. So what are you reading or watching right now? Who wants to answer that?
I can start. I'm reading a book called The Darker Nations by Vijay Prashad, which is, you know, this look at this kind of failed non-aligned movement, and, you know, what were the reasons to fail it. But it's really interesting, or I'm enjoying it. Cool.
Fantastic. Okay. Like a true intellectual, you're not watching anything, you're reading. I applaud.
No,
I applaud.
I'm watching things too, but what am I watching? Succession, rewatching
Okay.
Succession. Yeah.
Okay, good. I had to bring you back down to earth a little bit. Okay. Farah, who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
Jacinda Ardern.
Oh, interesting. During pre-COVID or during COVID?
Any day of the week.
Yeah, she would be interesting, very interesting person.
Yeah, like she makes politics look hot.
Yeah, it's hard to do that. That's a hard costume to pull off.
Especially where we come from.
That's so true. Okay, let's do Somji. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
I have no idea. Like, I don't know. I have no idea, and I don't know what work you're talking about. My own personal work.
No, let's talk about GPP. When somebody walks by GPP at El Sirkal and they sort of wander in, what do they initially misunderstand about what GPP is supposed to be doing? What is the mission versus what they think it is?
Good question. I mean, I don't know. We're so multifaceted in what we do, and whether it's, you know, having programming and having artist talks like we did one tonight, or whether it's hosting workshops on how to take better pictures with your smartphone, or even, you know, make short films, to you know, printing you know, beautiful prints on like different kinds of paper, to curating shows for you know, government, non-government organizations or companies. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't appreciate the scale and the breadth of work that we kind of have to do just to survive. So yeah, and I think, you know, we walk in, it's like a gallery, but it's a lot more. So it's quite a unique hybrid model, but, you know, more out of necessity rather than design.
Very cool. And then the last one, Farah, outside your profession, whose work inspires you?
My mom's.
What does she do?
She's a homemaker, a real one.
Amazing. I look forward to meeting her. Okay, fantastic. So let's keep on going. Our first question comes from Mohamed. I just asked you to unmute. If you can unmute, that'd be great.
Hello. Hello.
Hey.
Hey. Hello, Somji and Farah. It's a nice talk. Nice to hear all of you. Just a question for you is like, I sent already in the chat, is like in most of the countries, especially in Arab region, you know, like visual storytellers face a lot of like government problems when their stories are about social issues or environmental change. I'm always asking this, I'm always wondering, is there a solution for visual storytellers, especially the freelance one? Is there a solution to protect them? Or in the future, is there like, we could create like a supporting system for them, and how to do this? Because I'm always wondering if this is a solution or no.
First of all, they should be protected at all costs. This is a very good question. And one thing's for sure, the online laws are not very clear in our region. So censorship, online censorship is a bit all over the place. You can get away with a lot. But one thing's for sure, Beirut DC can promise that we're working on some new resources about that specifically. It might take some time, but we know that this is something that everyone needs to have access to. And I'm just going to look for a link and paste it for you in the chat of work from partners of ours who already do that for filmmakers and journalists. It's a European type of guide, but maybe you can start reading that until we have something more catered for the region.
Yeah, Mohammed, I think there really aren't any formal kind of umbrella organizations that look at, protections and all kinds of protections, right? I mean, for photographers, there's copyright protections, there's personal protection, and, when the recent turmoil that happened in Palestine, for example, we saw a lot of that kind of issues come to the fore. But it's great to see that there are a lot of informal communities, and Mohammed, you're part of some of these, whether it's like ADPP or kind of the GPP network, or the different organizations that kind of or individuals also who will be very quick to try and assist wherever they can. But you're right that there is a lack of like a formal structured organization, especially in our region. And as Farah said, like online laws are very tricky. And, in the Gulf, for example, if you put up an image of somebody who you don't have permission from, you could go to jail. And, simple things like that. But, and sadly, we don't really have much of a structured formal protection bodies, but hopefully that changes.
Okay. Somji, thank you so much. Farah, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciated you being willing to have an unusual conversation. Usually people stay in their specific industries, and it's really fun that we got to have a conversation with somebody from the photography world, somebody from the film world. It's a treat for us as viewers and listeners. So thanks so much. As we mentioned at the beginning, this is part of a long series that we're doing, exploring the future of a lot of different things, language, script, food, so education. So please go to the afikra.com/RSVP website to see the upcoming episodes in this series. And if you don't already subscribe to our podcast, you should. And this will go up on our podcast and on our YouTube page in the next couple of days. So you can tell all your friends about how cool of a person you are and that you got to hear this thing. Okay, everybody, thanks so much. Enjoy your day or night wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.